Yuzuha is our latest limited support agent, and what Astra is to attackers, Yuzuha is to anomalies. Her buffs are incredibly strong, and she does have quite a bit of depth to her kit. I have a guide come out that breaks down the character in more detail, but in short, the way that she works is quite straightforward. When you use her EX or ultimate, she'll buff your party and apply an anomaly building damage over time effect to the enemy alongside the sweet scare debuff. Then, the next instance of elemental damage done by an active character will fix her damage over time and aftershocks to be that of the character. Every tick of the dot will build a bit of anomaly, and then when her aftershock is triggered by an attack, it will do a large burst of anomaly buildup according to the element match. So ultimate into an electro character doing electro damage, and she'll build electro anomaly. If you do it with ether instead, she'll element match and start building ether of her attacks instead. And this applies even to unique elements, so if you swap to Miyabi, use her dot and aftershocks will build frost. Once the element matching is set, it will remain until the debuff runs out, so no other character can change the element match. But you can reset it by using either her ultimate or reacts again, overriding the previous element match. The buildup could actually be a problem, as Yuzuha wouldn't have anywhere near as much anomaly proficiency as true anomaly agents, meaning she'd be diluting the buildup. But turns out that she works like a bang boo. I covered this in a lot more detail in my Vivian guide, although to be honest it's more of a how anomaly works guide, but in case you haven't watched it, when a bang boo builds anomaly, it does not dilute it. You can build 50% of the gauge with a bang boo and 50% of the gauge with an agent, and the game will consider it to be no different than if you built 100% of the gauge with the agent. This is how Yuzuha's element match attacks work. Any buildup does not dilute anomaly, making her incredibly strong. To be honest, this can be a bit problematic, as between Anomaly Mastery D6, Anomaly buildup bonuses from your agents and Yuzuha's buffs, as well as her buildup being loaded on her aftershock attacks, which come only every 8 seconds, it means you're going to be really feeling the 3-second Disorder internal cooldown. Not just once, or twice, or 3 times, but 4 times, 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, 50 times. To be honest, I've really struggled playing teams with Yuzuha because she really messes with your ability to plan out routes. When her aftershock lands, you're going to be getting so much build-up that you frequently have both anomalies maxed out. So when you disorder one, you're stuck at max gauge on another for a good 3 seconds. The issue isn't even that she gives too much build-up, but how you suddenly get a bunch of it on her aftershocks. I'm not a particularly good anomaly player though, so I'm sure the fiends out there will be able to figure out how to best route with her on the team. I may not be all that gung-ho about grinding out runs with her, but given that I'm privileged enough to access the creator server, that did give me a bit of a head start. And not just with Yuzuha, but with the new boss as well. The new boss is actually quite simple. If anything, I'd say it's quite a relaxing boss fight. She will do some attacks here and there, but there's nothing to write home about. The only normal attack worth noting is that sometimes she'll start charging up talismans that lead to a special sword attack, which makes her immune to being interrupted by anything, ornaments included. The attacks themselves also have no yellow or red flashes. I mention this because it's a frustrating attack to deal with, providing no perfect assist opportunities and being really long. So if you get this in the opener, I'd recommend restarting. When it comes to performance points, it's a pretty simple mechanic. At around 1:45 on the clock, the boss will jump on a platform and become fully invincible. She'll then throw swords which set miasmic pools on the ground and set an area of effect explosion on the active character. If you then get the attack to detonate on top of the miasmic pools, they'll also explode and be purged right after. Assuming you dodged every single hit, that gives you 1,700 points. When she comes down, she'll do a big AoE attack and have a miasmic shield. But if you've done the mechanic right, it'll break really fast, giving you plenty of resources to burst her down right after. That's kind of all there is to the boss. She feels almost like a training dummy fight, a bit like Bringer in that regard. However, she also feels like Bringer in the sense that she's insanely tanky. Miasma Priest, for example, has 77 million health, but the new boss is over 100 million. With our current lineup of characters, I think killing at all M0s is going to be incredibly hard, if not outright impossible. Then again, with how difficult Yuzuha makes routing and my relative lack of skill with anomaly teams means I'm not best placed to push the high scores, which I'm sure others will. Thing is, these scores do come with a strong stage buff as well, although it's rather restrictive. Whenever you inflict an attribute anomaly, she takes more damage. This resets after the miasmic shield comes up, but since that only happens once per fight, it isn't really a problem. It does lock this boss to anomaly teams though, as it's a significant damage increase that applies only to anomaly damage. Rotation buffs change with every cycle, but for this showcase I was using Artful, a 15% increase to anomaly buildup, 40 anomaly proficiency, and when attribute anomaly is inflicted, 20 energy every 15 seconds and 20% death shred for 10 seconds. With that out of the way, let's have a look at the fight. Character builds here would enter live server standards. Counting attack percent and anomaly proficiency as substats, Jane has 30 substats total, which is a good measure for a well-built anomaly unit. If you're the kind that counts flat attack and pen as half stats, then that'd go up to 34 substats. 4-piece Fang Metal is the obvious choice, but 2-piece is flex. I used Phaethon's Melody as I was experimenting with different D6 options, but honestly, with all the build-up bonuses, it'd likely be better to run 2-piece Freedom Blues or Chaos Jazz. Whichever character is benefiting from Yuzuha's element match can run attack percent D6 and be fine, but it can make rotations a bit too dependent on Yuzuha's Aftershock build-up. For Jane, I found that attack percent D6 was better if I wanted to play the comp as a Disorder comp, but running Anomaly Mastery D6 and ignoring Disorders altogether ended up giving me better scores. Just going for as many assaults as possible with Vivian Bloom supporting was a good 3,000 to 5,000 points better than trying to bounce back and forth between anomalies. Although of course, Anomaly Mastery isn't going to do anything if you're constantly getting ICD'd, so do experiment with what flows best for you. Vivian is also at 30 substats total, and if you count flat as halves, then she'd be at 32.5 substats. Since Yuzuha's element match was going to Jane in the run, Anomaly Mastery D6 felt like a necessity. Even if the game plan was to prioritize assaults over disorders, more disorders is always good, and it's not like Vivian Anomaly buildup is particularly strong. Given the boss can do the charge-up attack with no flashes, and in the run shown it happened quite often, Vivian may not get as many chances to defensive assist as in other fights, which can limit her buildup. So Anomaly Mastery is the pick for consistency, although I'm sure an attack percent D6 could work too depending on routing. 4-piece Phaethons with a 2-piece Freedom or Chaos is the only real option for Vivian anyway, so nothing of note. Yuzuha is the unit that's least built, packing only 26 substats total, 28 if you count flats as halves. It's not like Yuzuha's damage is bad, in fact her raw skill damage multipliers are decently high. You could even run her as an Astro replacement in crit teams if you build her with crit stats. But since this is an anomaly team, she's going to be running Anomaly Proficiency D4, so crit subs won't contribute here. Anomaly Mastery D6 is needed so that Yuzuha can cap out her additional ability buff, and attack percent D5 is the only way we're going to hit the 3000 attack to cap out her core passive buff. Which means there isn't much room to play around with main stats. If anything, the priority is just getting enough attack percent substats to hit the 3000 attack threshold. It's true that her element match attacks don't care for her damage and proficiency, but because we're running her in a physical comp with Jane, that means her defensive assists, EXs, chains, and ultimates will still dilute assaults, so the more we get, the better. When it comes to her sets, it's a bit awkward. Even with the energy regen from her Wenjin, you won't even have half of the energy required to use her EX enough times to have the full uptime on Astral Voice. You can work around this in combos, like using her ultimate, EX, and then chain to build 3 stacks of stun, but realistically you only have 1 stack up, if even, for half the time. So you can run a 4-piece Swing Jazz or Proto-Punk, but with only 2 stuns a fight, you won't be using chains all that often. And given Yuzuha and other anomaly units use 2 assist points per parry, you're going to run out of parry points fast, needing to use ultimates to sustain upkeep. So there is no good choice for her 4-piece. I found most success with 4-piece Astral, especially because the 2-piece attack percent bonus feels pretty important to be able to hit 3000 attack with only 1 attack percent main stat. And if you want to max out Yuzuha's buff from her additional, she needs to be using 2-piece Phaethons, which limits her options. So 4-piece Astral with 2-piece Phaethons is the easiest combination to build around, but far from the only workable one. With the builds covered, let's break down the fight itself. In all honesty, this was pretty unstructured. I didn't sit down to lab a route beyond the opener, and Yuzuha's build-up makes it really difficult to be consistent with anomaly setups or combos. The boss using the Talisman charge attack frequently also messes up Ether build-up, as its lack of flashes means fewer Vivian defensive assists. So this is more freestyle than planned, but there are some things you will want to do. Although I dashed 3 times on Jane, this isn't for Predatory Instinct, as it's maxed out on combat start. Doing 2 back and 1 forwards though helps put Vivian in position for her special shortcut string, giving us 1 flight feather and suspension to convert them. From there, a dash attack to refresh Predatory into a full string. Since we want to always keep Predatory Instinct up, try to dash before strings, so another dash into EX. Here we want the boss to do any parable attack that gives us 2 defensive assist opportunities, one for Vivian to build feathers and another to Yuzuha. This is because after her defensive assist, she can shortcut her EX to cast faster. Normally her EX is very slow, so using it raw isn't ideal. But after certain moves, namely perfect dodge, dodge counters and assist follow-ups, she can shortcut into a faster version. With that, we use up Vivian's last feather and have all of Yuzuha's buffs up. The quick assist into Jane will element match her to physical, and we're set up to get an assault. This is the smoothest opener I found, which is why if the boss doesn't give any parable attacks and goes into the Talisman charge move, I'd just reset and start over. It feels like a 1 in 4 chance or so not terribly bad. After assault, Vivian still has 1 feather, so we want to use that up. This is because at this point, the boss will usually perform an attack, which we can use to get a defensive assist on Vivian into her EX, capping out on feathers. Unfortunately, on this run, that doesn't happen, and since I can see the talisman charge, I just swap the Vivian and EX into the basic follow-up. Then it's just sending ultimates and trying to maximize Vivian's feather usage. Although do try to dash before Jane's to maintain stacks. As mentioned before, going for this order just gave me lower scores over maximizing the number of assaults, so no need to plan out too much. Since I get this order ICD'd out of a corruption proc, a quick swap to Vivian into a raw special to proc it, then to use her for her ultimate. The cool thing about Yuzuha's ultimate is that unlike most other supports, which give 10 energy to all characters and 20 extra to the next character, Yuzuha just gives a blanket 25 energy to all, setting us up nicely for the stun by refreshing her buffs and debuffs and giving resources as well as an astral voice stack. From here it's mostly just freestyling while trying to avoid this order ICD. Since Jane's chain is too fast, I didn't want to risk getting corruption and then going into Jane chain, so I hang a bit until I get assault, then do Vivian chain. The Zolder ICD will prevent it from ticking, but Vivian's dive can still trigger it after, so onto Jane chain we go. Since Yuzuha's chain is pretty fast, builds decent anomaly, and gives another astro stack, I found it worthwhile to use. There's no way we're getting 2 assaults with the time left, so a swap to Yuzuha's EX will trigger assault and give us 1 final stack of astro. I tried getting corruption here, but wasn't able to do it on time. Not like physical disorder does much anyways. It's not a particularly optimized combo, nor is it thoroughly planned. I also forgot to use dashes before Jane's EXs, so I lost out on predatory instinct stacks. It was freestyle, so if there's one thing that can be improved in this run, it's the in-stun burst. Once stun ends though, you ideally want to be in a position where you have ultimates coming back up, as you want to use Jane and Vivian's before the boss becomes invincible. Unfortunately, I forget to dash again, meaning Jane's ultimate doesn't trigger assault due to the missing build-up. It still works out in the end though, with both her and Vivian's ultimates going off in time. If you can be at over 23,000 score at this point, then it's a solid start. Just be quick about it, as if you don't, the boss will jump out mid-ultimate cutscene, which is an immediate restart. And then just do the mechanic and get ready to burst. Yuzuha's EX provides an easy way in, and since the miasma shield is about to break, spend as much energy on characters as possible so as to not overcap from the miasma shield break bonuses. You don't need Yuzuha's ultimate here, but it's a near guaranteed break of the shield, so you get to actually do some damage faster even if it means being a bit too full in energy. Stun will come fast due to our early ultimates before the invincibility phase, so make sure to build some astral stacks. Our early ultimates also mean that we should be getting another set of them just as the stun begins. Yuzuha chain follows, as before, into ultimates. I actually mess up here, again failing to dash before Jane's ultimate. Worse yet though is that I should have gone straight into Vivian. Instead, I stay on Jane to build up one more assault, but foolishly swap out too early, meaning I missed out on not just a corruption disorder, how to use Vivian's ultimate earlier, but the assault as well. At this point I'm pretty pissed, so I stop and contemplate just restarting. But at 43,000 left after the stun, it's salvageable. If possible, you want to be at around 44 to 45,000 here at least, but it's fine. Playing on tilt can be a problem though, and things do take a turn for the worst. Instead of spending energy on Yuzuha and Vivian before Yuzuha's ultimate, I just go straight into it, wasting energy. I'm just throwing everything I've got out, trying to squeeze in enough decibels for one more Jane ultimate. Thankfully, the parries give me enough, landing one last assault before the fight ends. And that's the run. And not particularly well planned and full of mistakes, but a good look at what you can expect by just freestyling. Had I used Vivian's ultimate in the second stun correctly, I could have gotten both a corruption disorder and an extra assault and stun, which would have likely have been another 2,000 score. The wasted energy in the final stretch could also have gotten me an extra assault or corruption disorder, meaning at least another 500 to 1,000 score. Not a particularly lucky run either, with the amount of talisman charge attacks which led to missing out on Vivian parries. And I wasn't particularly good with managing Jane's passion state and predatory instinct stacks, which would have greatly increased assault damage at times. So there's huge room for improvement. I can definitely see some 55,000 and beyond scores for this fight, maybe even higher, assuming comparable substats. Getting 65,000 though does seem like it'd be a challenge at all M0 P1s. Jane M2 or Yuzuha M2 are insanely strong, so I wouldn't be surprised seeing some cost sacrifice, like giving up Yuzuha's Wenjin for Credo and running some Mindscapes for much better scores. And of course, Alice is coming soon, so this could very well just be her shield boss. Unfortunately, no kill from me. There's definitely a steep learning curve with Yuzuha, as her build-up can make rotations awkward, so as people get a feel for the character and start mastering her in full, we'll be seeing much better scores. Post-production to know here just to say, the buff has changed. Artful now provides 20% agent damage and 20% physical damage, and up to 35% death shred if you can maintain disorders. Your normally build-up and energy refund are gone, but in exchange we get a lot more damage. So Yuzuha actually becomes a lot smoother to play. You're still grappling with ICDs due to how loaded her build-up can be at times, but ironically, having both less build-up for all agents and energy does make things flow a lot nicer. By itself, this wouldn't necessarily give better scores. From some few runs, doing back-to-back assaults still ends up being better, but the Zordas have a lot more value now, and the extra damage and Death Shred really come in clutch. With only a few attempts, even though I didn't play particularly well, I'm already at 52,500 instead of just under 51, so it feels like there's a higher ceiling for scores. I'll have the second run uploaded separately and linked in the description and pinned comment, although it's much of the same. All this goes to show is how much of character feel rides on the encounter and environment they played in. Now back to the video. I did also try some Yanagi runs with Yuzuha on Marinette, and it was so easy that I don't think it's particularly worth highlighting. With 35 substats on Miyabi, 28 on Yanagi, and 26 on Yuzuha, I managed to very comfortably kill Marinette with very little thought or practice required. Quite literally just ran in, messed up every combo, screwing up the Zordas, overcapping on stacks, and preemptively breaking freezes. I let Yuzuha's buff drop, didn't wait for clones, and had terrible luck with their RNG too, with only 2,200 performance points, and still managed to get a kill with time to spare. Yuzuha isn't even that big for Miyabi, whose damage isn't really driven by anomaly. But the ease in which Yuzuha allows for the Zorda dancing means I was overflowing with resources I didn't know what to do with. So there is something for everyone with Yuzuha. If you're a tryhard looking to optimize rotations, working around her Aftershock build-up, managing her resources, Astral Voice stacks, and anomaly ICDs is actually really difficult to do well. Or if you're more casual and just want to check her into a team and have a good time, then she does that fine too. And that's a quick overview of Yuzuha in Deadly Assault. I will have a more comprehensive guide for her coming later, so do keep an eye out for that. And although Yishuan's banner is long gone, I still have some videos planned out for her. These characters just have way too much depth. So if you're interested in detailed character guides, niche tech, or even just fundamental game mechanics, do like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. I've got more videos coming. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.